So welcome back to Balderdash Academy. We're here today with visiting Professor Jetsee Thal. Jetsee is an audio-video editor, born and raised in New York. He spent the last 4 years in Los Angeles, California, working for a creative agency as senior video editor. He's produced content for Netflix, Warner Brothers, Universal, and more. In his off time, you might know him as Jetsee. He's an electronic music artist. He also records voiceover skits with his friends. Jetsee, welcome to Balderdash Academy.
Thanks for having us. Quite an introduction. I appreciate that. I've never had that in my entire life, so thank you.
You're big time now. You're on Balderdash Academy. This is where all the big names go.
You should make your parents do it before like Thanksgiving, because that's what I do.
Oh my gosh, that's a great idea. I'm not even kidding.
Yeah, you're going to be seen by tens of people.
Mm-hmm.
So
maybe
and
12.
one pug.
Maybe.
And as long as one pug out there sees me, I'll be fine.
So Jetsee, working in the entertainment industry, right?
Yes.
But it has to be interesting. I mean, you have to have worked on some pretty cool stuff, right?
It is, and it's never boring. There is almost always a client ask around the corner, and definitely never a lack of things to do. So,
yeah, what's your favorite project you've worked on so far?
Really good question. It never really comes down to the project, to be honest with you. Get a little corny, it's always the team members that I work with that end up making the project. So if I just have a good time, I could be working on like a movie I don't really like or whatever, something that's just not for me, and I'll still enjoy making the stuff for it because I'm working with a great team of people. It's just it always comes down to that.
Now, what's some of the things that you like in a team that you work with?
That's a good question. Mostly just people that are good listeners. They like read everything you write. They don't, they're not yes men, just people that are actually like avidly wanting to make a good product. It just makes a world of difference when you're working on literally anything. Like it could be something for kids. It could be, a comedy thing. It could be an action thing. It doesn't really matter as long as the people you're working with care about the product. And the stuff we make too. It's not the movie itself. I should clarify. It is content for the movies.
Yeah.
So it's like those little short snackable videos you get to see on Facebook and Instagram. Yeah, if you ever gotten that unskippable ad for a movie, that was me. Sorry about that.
Damn you,
Jetsee!
you do make them very interesting. I watch them.
The editing is so good.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's a smaller company. Obviously it's not like me on the front helm. It's a smaller agency, but what we do, we try to make some cool stuff. And I'm fortunate to be working with an awesome team. So
Nice.
yeah, that's probably the best part about it.
Early on, I was poking about the difference between analog and digital, and I mean the reality between the two is you just have different things that can go wrong.
Yes, actually, very good.
One. Well, I mean, and that's true. I mean, one over the other, it's like the difference between a Mac and a PC. You just have a different set of complaints. It's the same. Right. It's the same beast in the long run.
My favorite joke between that is when a problem goes wrong on a PC, you get this error code that's like error 41519, and you could like Google that code on Google, and you can see what the error was. And I was like, oh, it was a problem with this thing. On Mac, you get a problem and just goes, something went wrong. Whoops.
Yeah.
And that's all you get. And you're just like, oh, how am I supposed to know what that is? That could be a million things. So
I love it. It keeps the mystery alive in the relationship.
It does. That's what keeps people coming back to Mac.
Yeah.
So does that mean that you're a PC guy?
Preferably, yes. I use the Mac for work, but on my own time, I have a PC and I use that for everything else.
Interesting.
Wow. Interesting.
Yeah.
So, one of the big differences between Mac and a PC, well, creatively, I'm a graphic designer when I'm not at the school, and the myth is Apples are fantastic for design. They're great at graphics, which was true before video games became a thing. And now all the high-speed render engines and video processors are all in PCs.
Yeah.
So, speaking of non sequiturs, are you a gamer? Do you play video games?
Sure.
And if so, what type do you get into?
Absolutely. I'm of the very small community that still plays fighting games like Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat. These games, they are huge franchises. You probably remember them from your childhood, but there aren't as many online people playing Street Fighter that there would have been in the arcades in person in the 90s. It was kind of at its peak then, and they still make these games. But I am in the fighting game community. I love playing fighting games with anyone I can. I'm a big fan of Street Fighter 5. So that's my game right now.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with button mashers.
Yeah.
You know?
It's true.
Those are the only ones I know how to play.
Yeah. Did the other guy fall down? Then I won.
Now, do you follow any leagues? Do you follow any esports around the online fighting games? Or
Yeah. Capcom has the Capcom Cup. It literally is like the Pro Tour they do every year.
Of course.
Which is cool. Obviously, yeah, of course. Duh. Don't follow the Capcom Cup. No, it's that's the stuff I really like. And yeah, I think the difference with the fighting game esports versus like stuff that most people recognize with like MOBAs and like stuff like StarCraft and Dota and all those things is those games are more team sports, and fighting games are so much more of like the video game equivalent of like a UFC fight. Like it's that guy versus that guy.
Right.
And you know, sometimes you just have these like skinny little nerds come up with a giant control stick and they just like kick somebody's ass and you just want to cheer for that guy. Like it's such a gratifying feeling when stuff like that goes down. And they pull out all the stops for these things. They have the fighting games set up with the TVs in a wrestling ring. And these people walk in with their arcade sticks. They will walk out to theme music, and they treat it like wrestling. So I'm not a wrestling fan. I'm a fighting game fan, and they do that exact stuff like they do in wrestling.
So you like Street Fighter, Mortal Kombat.
Yep.
What about the oh my god, it's so graphic. Super Smash Brothers.
Oh my gosh. Well, yeah.
Do you get into that?
Yeah. I play Smash all the time. I grew up playing the original on the N64. Nice. I still play it to this day. I have the Switch one. That one I love playing. Don't watch it too much. It's still just as much of a fighting game as anything else, but it's certainly a different audience than there would be for Street Fighter. They have their own thing,
I hear they're bringing fatalities into it. Just like
I wish.
That'd be so
Kirby.
sick.
Just Kirby sucks in the character and then poops out a skeleton.
Yeah.
You know?
We've all been wanting it. Just throw in a Mortal Kombat character and you get your wish. Like put Sub-Zero fighting Mario. That's what we want.
Just now, for the viewer, we're filming this in late August.
Oh yeah.
And I know it's the end of December, so the world might have changed since then, but at least for now it hasn't. So with the pandemic and with the push for at least now for social distancing, esports could potentially be the new sport forefront that is social distance based. You can do it land based.
Right.
Now, there was a while ago a push to get it included in the Winter Olympics.
Yes, and actually,
what do you think, Coach?
Capcom was on the front helm of that, and they were putting so much money into putting Street Fighter as the first like Japanese Olympic sport video game. And then COVID happened, and what's happening with that now? Like it could have been, it really could have. Interesting point to say about social distancing, because you can play games online. There are definitely advantages to having tournaments in person, and unfortunately the community is suffering because not everyone's internet connection is stable. When someone starts to lag, the game ruins. It's the worst experience. So
tell us about it.
So yeah. Well, you guys have to do comedy over the internet, which is even harder. I feel for you guys more than the esports people.
Wow, thank you.
Thanks.
So Jesse, a hobby of yours is obviously gaming, but you also make electronic music. Tell me about how you got into that and what kind of electronic music you make.
Sure, I appreciate the full interview happening right now. I love using. It's actually funny because we're talking about analog and digital. There is a love for analog stuff. People are nostalgic for the '80s, even when they didn't grow up in the '80s. Like big shows on Netflix, like getting that '80s vibe to it and stuff. I always find that it's interesting that if they're making Stranger Things included, there are things about like making old sounding stuff using new equipment that I love so much. And the type of music that I make is usually drawn from the past. There are, of course, hip hop songs from the 90s were always my favorite. So I'm trying to make more instrumental beats you would have heard on a 90s hip hop track than you would have heard present day. So there's a lot more, like I make 90s instrumentals. I guess that sort of scene has blown up more now as the lo-fi hip hop, which is kind of like when people want to do homework, they turn this YouTube channel on and they listen to lo-fi
Yeah.
beats. So it's become a big
Yeah, I do.
phenomenon now. But I've always loved those kind of beats. They played them all the time, on television I saw growing up, and I always was like, man, like you see these guys on the records and the MPCs, what they call, they're like a big sample machine. And now I figure out it could just do it all on the computer. So I self-taught myself, and I make these kind of old-sounding beats using new digital equipment, and
Awesome.
it comes out. I can often get an older-sounding sound if I try hard enough. So
What do you do with these songs?
Cool.
I take a bunch of drum noises, I sequence them up into like kind of a boom bap-ish beat. That's what I call the drum tracks on those older hip hop songs. They call it a boom bap. You could look it
Boom
up.
bap.
Boom bap.
Boom bap.
And then then I get a sample or something like from the 70s, like an old song, maybe slow it down and cut it up into pieces until it's unrecognizable. And then you kind of put each sample into a button on your keyboard, and you just press it to play the sound, and you launch it on the right time of the beat, and you end up making like a ooh ah ooh ooh ooh, ah, and then you kind of have fun with it, and before you know it, you're playing the keyboard or a sampler like it's an instrument.
That is so awesome.
Yeah, it's
Boom
fun.
bap. I always
blows my mind.
order that at the Vietnamese restaurant. Great dumplings.
Exactly.
So for those interested in Jesse's music, the links are in the description.
I was just gonna cross promote here.
Please do.
Yeah.
Go ahead, yeah.
So I've got a podcast. Everyone has a podcast these days, but I have a music podcast where we talk to plunderphonics artists, electronics artists, hip hop artists. Me and friend of the show, Jack Milosh, which you guys should be well familiar with now. Anyway, we recently interviewed Jesse, and we listened to his favorite, my favorite record of his called Bagels. And we listened
love
through the whole
bagels.
thing and talked about it and dissected it. It's really awesome. I think it'll be a great pod. So definitely check that out if you're interested. And
Sweet.
learning
Is
So
more
there
about
beer with
our
that?
weird world
Yes.
of music.
They were
Oh, the podcast is called Collaboradio.
Collaboradio.
Link in the description.
Thank you. Yeah.
So the that older aesthetic is what you do to take your samples and to adjust it and to move it and to build it into what you have as your
That's
music.
correct. The tools may have changed, but the technique is the same. So in the same way that you were limited before with a machine and floppy disks, I'm not even kidding. These 90s hip hop artists had to use floppy disks to load their samples. We now have MP3s, we have WAV files, and we have it all in the same software as the running on a computer. So I just like cut it on up in the program, and in the same program, assign it to a launcher, like a button, and then hit it on the right time and just have fun with it. So yeah, the principle.
So when you
stays
say
the same.
keyboard,
I mean the QWERTY
do you
keyboard.
mean like your ASDFGHJKL keyboard?
Yes, and that actually leads me into another thing, which is when I play, besides just sampling, when I actually play the piano or digital keyboard, I use my QWERTY keyboard to play the keyboard.
QWERTY.
Yes, I use the computer keyboard to play the physical keyboard. So sometimes, or a musical keyboard. So sometimes I will learn that plus bracket 9 is also like GFA. And I just start playing the piano music. And it's strictly for convenience. Like I can buy a MIDI keyboard if I want to, but I just love how tiny these are, and I just want to if it's making the sound in the program, I'm just gonna learn where everything lines up. So
That blows my mind.
it's just use what you got.
So you were
amazing.
talking about your influences.
Yeah.
And before we go, what 80s show to you had the best theme song?
Wow.
Ooh.
This is a tough one.
It was probably by P-Dog.
Law and Order.
And I'm asking because I just sat here trying to think of one with the best, and I can't do it.
Yeah.
Movies, maybe.
Reading Rainbow for me.
Oh man.
Oh, yes!
Yeah, 80s shows slapped. Like all 80s shows theme songs slapped, but I think the cartoons from the 80s songs went the hardest. And I'm gonna go with
Yes.
Thundercats.
Yes.
I will
Thundercats, oh.
Yes. Thundercats. Like you don't get that anymore. It was so cool. So I'm going with Thundercats for that one.
Nice.
Go with Thundercats, yeah.
Yeah.
So speaking of going, join us when we return for our Steam Pop quiz and Lie again, only on Balderdash Academy. Go Dashers!
That's us.
Boop, 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 boop.
For complete episodes and more, visit us at balderdashacademy.com.
This may be the biggest episode of Balderdash Academy yet. We have a huge cliffhanger when it comes to the 30 seconds or less question. And much like a cult favorite TV show, we may never find out the answer. Also, Nate gets into hot water with millennials, a pig takes center stage, and all's wells that ends wells. Only on Balderdash Academy.
Thank you for watching. Remember to like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon. You can find us on your favorite podcast service as Balderdash Academy. Go Dashers!